ॐ तव कथामृतं तप्तजीवनम् कविभिरीडितम् कल्मषापहम् श्रवणमङ्गलम् श्रीमदाततम् भुवि गृह्णन्ति ये भूरिदा जना. So today we will start the new chapter, the third chapter of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. It's Visit to Vidyasagar. So as an introduction, we will find it's mentioned that in the Gospel itself, we will read out the portion where Vidyasagar is being introduced. So Pandit Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar was born in the village of Bir Singh, not far from Kamarpukur, Sri Ramakrishna's birthplace. He was known as a great scholar, educator, writer, and philanthropist. One of the creators of modern Bengali, he was also well versed in Sanskrit grammar and poetry. His generosity made his name a household word with his countrymen, most of his income being given in charity to widows, orphans, indigent students, and other needy people. Nor was his compassion limited to human beings. He stopped drinking milk for years so that the calves should not be deprived of it. And he would not drive in a carriage for fear of causing discomfort to the horses. He was a man of indomitable spirit, which he showed when he gave up the lucrative position of principal of the Sanskrit College of Calcutta because of a disagreement with the authorities. His affection for his mother was especially deep. One day, in the absence of a ferry boat, he swam a raging river at the risk of his life to fulfill her wish that he should be present at his brother's wedding. His whole life was one of utter simplicity. The title Vidyasagar, meaning ocean of learning, was given him in recognition of his vast erudition. Sri Ramakrishna had long wanted to visit Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. Learning from M that he was a teacher at Vidyasagar's school, the master asked, "Can you take me to Vidyasagar? I should like very much to see him." M told Ishwar Chandra of Sri Ramakrishna's wish, and the Pandit gladly agreed that M should bring the master some Saturday afternoon at 4 o'clock. He only asked M what kind of Paramahansa the master was, saying, "Does he wear an ochre cloth?" M said, "No, sir. He is an unusual person. He wears a red bordered cloth and polished slippers. He lives in a room in Rani Rashmuni's temple garden. In his room, there is a couch with a mattress and a mosquito net. He has no outer indication of holiness, but he doesn't know anything except God. Day and night, he thinks of God alone." On the afternoon of August 5, the master left Dakshineshwar in a hackney carriage, accompanied by Bhavanath, Aim, and Hajra. Vidyasagar lived in Badur Bagan in central Calcutta, about 6 miles from Dakshineshwar. On the way, Sri Ramakrishna talked with his companions, but as the carriage neared Vidyasagar's house, his mood suddenly changed. He was overpowered with divine ecstasy. Not noticing this, M pointed out the garden house where Raja Ram Mohan Roy had lived. The master was annoyed and said, I don't care about such things now. He was going into an ecstatic state. The carriage stopped in front of Vidyasagar's house. The master alighted, supported by M, who then led the way. In the courtyard were many flowering plants. As the master walked to the house, he said to M, like a child, pointing to his shirt button, "My shirt is unbuttoned. Will that offend Vidyasagar?" "Oh no," said M. "Don't be anxious about it. Nothing about you will be offensive. You don't have to button your shirt." He accepted the assurance simply like a child. So it's a simple thing, but we will find in the life of Ramakrishna, this is happening again and again. That sometimes he appears to be a very humble soul, down to earth person. If anyone calls him Guru, Baba, he's annoyed. He will say, God is the only Guru. I am not even, just even a hair of his body. So like that, of a devotee's body, not of God. I am not even a hair of a God's devotees, this body. So that type of reaction he would have if anyone is to even call him Guru or Baba. But the same Ramakrishna, we will find that sometimes when that he has gone into a state where even by a simply divine touch, he can just take anyone to samadhi, in deep meditation, into a divine intoxication. He as if is something much larger than life personality. So these two things coexist in the life of Ramakrishna, as has been written by Swami Sharadananda, the Ramakrishna, the great master. So there, while discussing the Guru Bhava of Sri Ramakrishna, he indicates that see, though Sri Ramakrishna we find is a humble soul, here also we find that he is a bit nervous, as if going to meet Vidyasagar. He's he has not buttoned his shirt, and for that he's in a fix whether that is going to annoy Vidyasagar. So that type of tension he has, and where he needs the assurance of M that you need not bother about all those things. And now as we proceed, that with this type of humble attitude, nervousness, as if he's going to meet someone really a great person, compared to him he is nothing, with this type of attitude he is going to meet Vidyasagar. Once he meets, and suddenly we will find there's a total change in his personality. The way he's conversing with Vidyasagar, Vidyasagar in those days of Bengal, of the modern Bengal, in those days, he was considered as, the Vidyasagar title itself means, the one is ocean of knowledge. He was called Vidyasagar, he was called Karuna Sagar, because of his compassion, as we just read it in his introduction. He was one of the most renowned figures of Bengal in those days. In his presence, when Sri Ramakrishna starts speaking, we find Vidyasagar is amazed. Some of the conversations of Ramakrishna, he is bound to accept that I have never heard such words. We will come to that. So this transformation, just now we found him as in a humble mood of it, just a ordinary person, like a devotee. And again, he find in the divine mood of a spiritual teacher. So it happens in all the spiritually illumined soul. Basically, they are very humble. Actually, they have become nothing. The total ego has been eradicated. And that's why they are such a efficient instrument in the hands of the divine. The divine can work through us only when our ego has been eradicated. At that story that which we indicated even in the last class, that when Radha asks Krishna that we never get your company all the time, the Krishna immediately showed the flute which he was holding and asked Radha to see what's there inside. Nothing. That's what Radha saw. It's a hollow bamboo structure. And then Krishna indicated, when anyone can become like that, hollow, means the ego has been eradicated, then only he can become the eternal companion of the divine. Not only that, then God starts playing music through his life. The flute is there for the music which Krishna plays through our lives, if we can really become the flute. And Ramakrishna is that flute. His totally humble soul. Ego has been eradicated. And that's why we say is a manifestation of the divine. It's a framework through which the divine is manifesting. All the divine incarnations are the framework through which the divine manifests. So here also we will find, as we proceed, once he is in presence of Vidyasagar, a total transformation of his mood happens. And all the conversations that goes on, you will find is really remarkable. It's not only for Vidyasagar. Anyone who goes through this conversation will find to how lucidly he is describing the profound truths of the scripture. And that also in a very playful mood, in a very jovial mood. So let's now proceed to the text. Vidyasagar was about 62 years old, 16 or 17 years older than the master. He lived in a two-story house built in the English fashion with lawns on all sides and surrounded by a high wall. After climbing the stairs to the second floor, Sri Ramakrishna and his devotees entered a room at the far end of which Vidyasagar was seated facing them, with a table in front of him. To the right of the table was a bench. Some friends of their host occupied chairs on the other two sides. Vidyasagar rose to receive the master. Sri Ramakrishna stood in front of the bench with one hand resting on the table. He gazed at Vidyasagar as if they had known each other before and smiled in an ecstatic mood. In that mood, he remained standing a few minutes, now and then, to bring his mind back to normal consciousness. He said, "I shall have a drink of water." So this is very interesting. Throughout the gospel, you will find Sri Ramakrishna now and then will be desiring to have a glass of water. It's very interesting that his mind, whenever it used to go to the realm of that non-duality, that was the natural state of his mind. Spontaneously, it used to go to samadhi. And he used to resort to these short, small resolutions to bring his mind down, just out of compassion, so that he can converse with the people, so that he can show the way to all the people who are there in his presence. So that's the wonderful thing. Again and again, he's going to samadhi. In that state, suddenly he will say, "I want to have a glass of water." With that resolution, he brings his mind down. And when the water is brought, many times we find he is not drinking it. That with that resolution, he is bringing the mind down, and that also out of compassion. That speaks of the mind of Ramakrishna. We, with a lot of effort, somehow may manage to keep our mind in some sublime thought for a fraction of moment or for some moment. Our natural state is the distraction. But for Ramakrishna, samadhi is the natural state. And from there to bring down, he has to take all these small, silly resolutions, sometimes which have no meaning. With that, he is to bring his mind down. So Vidyasagar told someone to bring water and asked M whether the master would like some sweetmeats also. Since M did not object, Vidyasagar himself went eagerly to the inner apartments and brought the sweets. They were placed before the master. Bhavanath and Hajra also received their share. When they were offered to M, Vidyasagar said, "Oh, he is like one of the family. We needn't worry about him." Referring to a young devotee, the master said to Vidyasagar, "He is a nice young man and is sound at the core. He is like the river Falgu. The surface is covered with sand, but if you dig a little, you will find water flowing underneath." So it's a river in Ayodhya, the river Falgu, which has an undercurrent. Not Ayodhya, it's near Kashi. It has an undercurrent. It is said that because of Sita's curse, it became undercurrent. Whatever may be the reason, here The context is something very interesting. That the river, there is a current, there is a flow, but no one can see it. Similarly, in spiritual life, the more our spiritual flow is undercurrent, the more it is not visible, the more it speaks of our true transformation. Because in this life, for everything, we want to project ourselves with the ego. That I am a person of name and fame, I am a person of such and such wealth. With behind all this, the ego works. And now, if we find a holy man also is projecting himself, we forget the basic thing of spirituality is the eradication of the ego. Once the ego falls off, nothing is there to bind us down. It is the locality of the ego which has resulted in this delusion of this limited individuality. So in the spiritual life, if we find anyone is posing as religious, know it for certain, it is humbugism. It is never true spirituality. And Ramakrishna, being the spiritually illumined soul, being avatar, he can immediately recognize. So seeing someone that who is appearing to be just a normal person, but within him, that spiritual undercurrent is flowing, and immediately he appreciates that. That he is a nice young man and is sound at the core. He is like the river Falgu. The surface is covered with sand, but if you dig a little, you will find water flowing underneath. In this life, we find it's a very, very common occurrence. It's a big paradox. If in the words, Swami Vivekananda used to give us statistics that most of the people are not seekers. They're quite happy with their day-to-day life. Among the seekers, know it for certain, 80% are humbugs. Means we're making a show of religion. 80%, just see the percentage he's saying. And after that, he doesn't end there. And another 15% somehow gets mentally deranged because of all their so-called peculiar ideas, or trying to overdo something, they get deranged, 15%. And 5% somehow sincerely proceeds towards the goal. So here this 80% humbugism is the thing which is really a matter of our, concern. Because in our so-called day-to-day life, you will find there are many persons who doesn't profess to be religious. In no way, but we will find they are much more humble, much more accommodating, much more, you say that as per the sympathy, compassion, all those divine qualities are finding expression through their life, but they don't profess that I am religious. There's a big paradox. There are many such people who in no way conform to any such religious belief, but they're humbler than the humblest person, nice person. But it's a big paradox. A great percentage of those who profess to be the religious are the cause of headache of the other family members. There's a huge percentage. They don't know how to deal with that person. So that's why we find that Sri Ramakrishna has hit the mark. And that's why in Bengali, there is a very nice saying that Sadhu hobe, sadhu sajbe na, grihastha sajbe, grihastha hobe na. That always pose to be a householder, never become a householder. Be detached and become a holy person, never pose to be a holy person. We always do the opposite. We always pose to be a holy person, and we are very, very actually highly attached to the so-called the mundane things, but we pose. That in Sanskrit they call dharma dhwaji. The religion is like a flag you have hoisted so that all can see it is being hoisted. So Swami Vivekananda used to say a wonderful thing, that so much energy we waste in this life to show others that I am very good. So much energy is wasted. If we would have used that energy to really transform ourselves, most probably we would have been a wonderful person. How much energy we waste just to show others that I am good. So Avatar recognizes that. And immediately he's acknowledging. You're seeing a young boy. He recognizes that to the core of his being, he's a nice. There's no such outer manifestation of it. So that's why immediately saying he's a nice young man. And he's sound at the core. He's like the river Falgu. The surface is covered with sand, but if you dig a little, you will find water flowing underneath. So these simple words have a great implication in our spiritual life. It's something through which we have to learn that what our spiritual life should be. The more we can hide our practices, even in the Bible, you will find that Jesus is saying that don't make a show of religion. Go to the corner of your house when in the absence of others, secretly try to commune with the divine. I forget the exact words. If I next time I will just find the quotation and relate to you all that even Jesus is saying the same thing. All the religious leaders in spiritual life, if we are really sincere about our spiritual progress, try to keep your spiritual practices as hidden as possible. Let people don't know. Just even compassion is also an aspect of spiritual practice. That's why they say when the right hand gives, the left hand shouldn't know. So all those things should be done in such a way that no one knows it. It's only you who know what you are doing, no one else. Everyone knows you to be an ordinary person. The more we can conduct ourselves in spiritual life in that way, then only the real spirituality is going to, evolve. You are going to evolve in spiritual life then and then alone. Otherwise, it's an irony that the spirituality entails the removal of ego, but in the name of spirituality, we will be actually nourishing the ego. So the more the humble we are, the more the practices are secret, the more the others don't know. As Tulsidas used to say very nicely, सबसे बसिए सबसे रसिए सबका लीजिए नाम हाजी करते रहो बैठे अपना ठाम. Mix with all. When you are bound to be with the others, you are bound to with your family members, you have to socialize as if you are with all. Don't at that time just say that I don't like all those things. I am very spiritually evolved. Let all have their share as per their demand on you is. But at the same time, haji karte raho, baithe apna tham. Don't forget that your goal in life, let that be there. Don't if you make a show of it, immediately the ego will come to picture. So don't make a show, even if it is not possible for the time being. Just to relate, I'm just speaking, it's not for all, means those who are in the family engrossed, they have to be with their family members. So be with them. But we will find time that in our order, when we found the President Maharaj, when someone goes and says that we are so busy with the household time, work, I don't get time for spiritual practice. They will simply ask, do you get time for taking your food? Do you get time for having your shower in spite of all your busy schedule? You get time. And you say you don't get time for your spiritual practice because that is not a necessity. Food is a necessity. Somehow you will manage. Somehow you will manage to have your shower, a little rest. And we say we don't have time. So we do have time. Only thing that necessity hasn't evolved. And that's why just we mix with all and complain, I don't have time. In spite, if we really had that necessity, after meeting all this family demands, still I could have practiced if that was a necessity. So that's the thing Sri Ramakrishna is indicating. There's so many, these ideas are there hidden in it. After taking some of the sweets, the master, with a smile, began to speak to Vidyasagar. Meanwhile, the room had become filled with people. Some were standing and others were seated. Master, today at last I have come to the ocean. Up till now, I have seen only canals, marshes, or a river at the most. But today, I am face to face with the sagar, the ocean. So see, here the iron, this Ramakrishna's, this wonderful presence of mind, his way, this presence of mind and his way of conversation is something, his this wittiness, all those things will be manifested. That his name is Vidya Sagar, ocean of knowledge. Even because of his compassion, people call him Karuna Sagar, ocean of compassion. So Ramakrishna is saying that at last I have came to the ocean. Till now, I was only see the canals, marshes, river. At last I've came to the ocean. So here also, Sri Ramakrishna is indicating in some other place in the gospel, he have told very interesting thing, that you should have reverence for all who excel in some field or other, knowing well that God is manifesting through him, through all those excellences. These are very important sentences, because you know that sometimes in our life, unnecessarily we'll be censoring others, criticizing others. We can get rid of this by all these little suggestions. If you can see the manifestation of the divine in any aspect of life, someone sings well, you can of course acknowledge and be reverential to that person, that God is manifesting through him. That's why he can just attract so many people. Even in Bhagavad Gita, the 10th chapter is Vibhuti Yoga. There we will find the same thing, that the Vibhuti Yoga means that God that is everywhere. God is present everywhere, but he manifests himself specially through certain aspects of life, through certain objects, through certain person. So there we find in one of the slokas, it is mentioned, Sarasam Asmi Sagara, that among all the water bodies, I am the ocean. So here also we find Ramakrishna is as if acknowledging the fact that he has at last came to the ocean, that the special manifestation of the divine is working through him. And that's why to acknowledge that, to revere that, he has came to meet him, because the special manifestation of the divine is through him too. Just the way the divine manifests in the deity, is the concept of Archavataram. It's a wonderful concept, that God is everywhere, but he specially manifests through the deity, the one to whom you do archana, Archavataram. Similarly, these persons of great caliber, excellence, are like the Archavataram, are like the deity through which the divine is manifesting. So relate to him through reverence. So that's why he's saying, at last I have come to the ocean. Up till now, I have seen only canals, marshes, or a river at the most. But today, I am face to face with the Sagar, the ocean. Vidyasagar smiling. Now we'll find that both are, there's as if interaction of witty remarks. Immediately Vidyasagar, he's a Pandit. Immediately he replies very nicely, then please take some salt water. Then please take home some salt water. And there's a laughter. Master, oh no, why salt water? You aren't the ocean of ignorance. You are the ocean of Vidya, knowledge. See, just see. Ramakrishna's repartee that you are Vidyasagar. You are not Avidyasagar, you are Vidyasagar. So why it should be salty water? You are the ocean of condensed milk. So in our Hindu scripture, that the idea is that Vishnu is lying in the ocean of the Kshiro, the Shagara, of condensed milk. So he's as if referring to that. You are the ocean of that condensed milk on which the Vishnu is lying. So you are the ocean of that condensed milk. You are the ocean of Vidya, knowledge, consciousness. So why should it be salty water? Vidyasagar. Now see, he also accept, because you know that after all his name only says he's Vidyasagar. Well, you may put it that way. The Pandit became silent. Now Sri Ramakrishna. Ramakrishna said, he's continuing his conversation, your activities are inspired by sattva. Though they are rajasic, action means rajas. So they are in general rajasic, but they're influenced by sattva, because behind that compassion is there. Though they are rajasic, they are influenced by sattva. Compassion springs from sattva. Though work for good of others belongs to rajas, yet this rajas has sattva for its basis and is not harmful. So this is a very interesting thing, that when you are giving, what's the motivation behind the act of giving? If you find that just by giving, you just experience an immense joy. You have no other expectation. There is a joy in giving. You give and you receive silently something. No one knows. You have received that bliss just by giving. That is sattva. The same gift can be with an advertisement. I can ask the photograph with the news channels and all to come and take the photo of what I'm giving, so that next day it may be advertised. That becomes rajasic. And again, I may give something to someone who doesn't deserve. I was not quite, I have not that proper discrimination, whom to give, what to give. That may be tamasic. That's what has been mentioned in Bhagavad Gita, that dana, in the 17th chapter, there can be 3 types of dana. That's what Sri Ramakrishna is indicating here. There is sattvic, because it is out of compassion. And he only gives to the person who are in need. He will not just simply squander his wealth, and there is no question of name and fame. So in this context, just let us refer to those 3 slokas of Bhagavad Gita in the 17th chapter. Very nice, where it speaks of the 3 types of dana, the 3 types of altruism. The first is sattvic, datavyam iti yat danam. That it is good to give, just with this idea, nothing else. Yadatavyam iti yat danam diyate anupakarine. I give without any expectation, just without considering anything in return. Deshe kale cha patre cha. And I just don't give, anyone asks, I give. I try to find out whether that what I'm going to give is really going to help him. The proper time, at the proper person, at proper place, means everything I take into account, and then without any expectation, I give. So that is sattvikam. Tad danam sattvikam smritam. So charity given to a worthy person, simply because it is the right to give. It is right to give, but there is no other expectation. It is always good to help the needy. So that's why I'm giving without consideration of anything in return, at the proper time and in proper place, is stated as sattvic. So here Vidyasagar's dana is sattvic. And what is rajasic? Yattu pratyupakarartham. Prati-upakarartham. That I am giving so that I can get something in return. That's for most of us. Phalam uddishya vapuna. Or for most probably some phala, some hope, some expectation, some name and fame, some, this propaganda. All those things may be there behind my gift. So yattu pratyupakaratham phalam uddishya vapuna diyate cha pariklishtam tad danam rajasam smritam. Such type of dana is rajasic. Now Vidyasagar's dana, we know it is full of compassion, nothing in return. Because very interesting, in the life of Vidyasagar, we find a very interesting comment much later in his life. When he was quite old, someone, for some reason, just started abusing him. It was in his presence, he was just standing in front of him, he was abusing him. And when the person stopped, Vidyasagar asked him, "Have I ever helped you? Why are you abusing me?" Because in his life, he had that experience, that those whom he has helped, in return, some way or other, they have tried to harm him. But he still went on helping, because his intention was not to get anything in return. So that's an ironical statement in the life of Vidyasagar. When someone abused him, he was asked him, "Have I ever helped you? Why are you just abusing me so much? Have I ever helped you?" So that's the thing, that there is no expectation in return. That is the rajasic. And tamasic, adesha kale yaddanam appatrebhyascha diyate asat kritam avagyatam tat tamasam udaritam. I heard that, that someone gets the tips because of, most probably in restaurant, you are working as in a restaurant, or some of the Uber drivers, they get tip for some very wonderful reason. Sometimes the tip may be quite big amount. And we find that the tip was given when he was totally drunk. And so he was totally drunk, and he was probably, when he was normal, most probably he would have not given. So he doesn't really, that person most probably doesn't deserve that much of money, but he was not, as he was in the tamasic state. Suddenly that some thought came, some impulse, out of impulse, a huge amount he gave. So that is tamasic. Sometimes in life it happens that someone died, and in that moment we are so dejected, we feel that life is useless, and we may have that impulsion may come, let me donate. Most probably the next day you will think the other way. There's a nice incident in the life of Swami Brahmananda, the first president of Ramakrishna order. When he was the president, a person came, his wife died, and he came and to give a huge amount of money as a donation. Brahmananda told, okay, it's very good that you want to donate. It's very good, but why not wait for a few days? And after a few days, he never came back. And then others complained that why that he was willing to give, why you are just delayed it. And then he told the same thing. He was not in a proper mood. His wife passed away. He was dejected. Suddenly that feeling came. I knew that it is not going to be the real feeling. And later he will repent that why I have given that so much of money. And we are not supposed to exploit someone's weakness. If he really has the urge to give, why not wait and then let him give? For us, we are totally dependent on God. If he has the will to give, after a few days, he can of course give. But I knew that very well, that it was just because of that temporary dejection that he felt like giving, which he really never meant. So such types of dana are tamasika. So now you will find that why Ramakrishna is saying that your activities are inspired by sattva. Though action means rajas, but behind that, pure compassion is there. Out of compassion, that his dana can be so effective. In Bengal, we know of Madhusudan Saraswati, the great poet. He became Christian, he went to the West, being with, infatuated with the glamour, and very quickly he could find that he could in no way establish himself in the West, and he became a total pauper. Though he had that talent, wonderful talents, but he found that now his life is totally spoiled. From West, he wrote a letter to Vidyasagar that I am in such a dire consequence. Can you help me? Vidyasagar, just see that he knows Desha Kala Patra, whom to help. Immediately he responded. And Vidyasagar, with Vidyasagar's help, Madhusudan could come back, establish himself, and the poems which he wrote are the masterpiece of Bengali literature. So now you will understand what real compassion is. He sees the person, whether he really deserves that or not just simply squandering the wealth, proper time, proper place, and out of compassion he's giving. So compassion springs from sattva. So that's the sattvic good. Through work for the good of others, that belongs to rajas. Yet this rajas has sattva for its basis and is not harmful. Sukha and other sages cherished compassion in their minds to give people religious instruction, to teach them about God. Even to teach is rajas. But that Sukha, like saint like Sukha, who was immersed in samadhi, Sri Ramakrishna is giving his example, that it was almost impossible to bring him back from samadhi. He's Vyasa's son. Vyasa knew that it is almost impossible to bring him back. But when the Bhagavatam, which was written, composed by Vyasa, and he knew that this is the scripture which is going to be the savior of mankind, that as it has been mentioned in the Bhagavatam, that when Krishna at the end of Dwapara, he won't be there in his physical form. Who will be there to save the mankind, to save the humankind? And the answer is, it's the Bhagavatam, the scripture. So it holds such an importance. It is through the scripture, God will be still instructing the humankind through those scriptures. So it has to be circulated, it has to be preserved. Now, how to circulate that? So if someone who is really authentic is preaching, then people will take it. If anyone goes and just speaks of Bhagavatam, why people will take it? Just the way in the present day, if you have to promote something, you do it through some very well-known figure, and that like the film stars or some uh, great singers. Through them, you try to promote something which will be accepted by all. So here also we find, to promote Bhagavatam, which is going to save the humankind, he needed Sukha to come back from his samadhi. And it is that by relating to, when one of the slokas of Bhagavatam was narrated in his presence, that brought him down from samadhi. And he came to Vyasa and learned the entire Bhagavatam. And it is Sukha who started preaching. So just see, it seems as if he came down from that state. Yes, but that coming down is out of compassion. It's come out of compassion for what has to be attained, he has attained. Now there is no selfish desire. After attaining, he comes down to save the humankind. So that's pure sattvic. So he's as if saying that you, Vidyasagar, your compassion is also like that. Sukha and other sages cherished compassion in their minds to give people religious instruction, to teach them about God. You're distributing food and learning. That is good too. If these activities are done in a selfless spirit, they lead to God. But most people work for fame or to acquire merit. Their activities are not selfless. Besides, you are already a Siddha. Siddha means illumined soul. But again, we will find Ramakrishna is the master of repartees, playing with words. Now, besides, you are already a Siddha. Now, Vidyasagar will ask, how is it that, sir? Siddha means a spiritually illumined soul. Okay, I am a scholarly person. Why you are saying me Siddha? But how is it that, sir? Master, laughing. So what he's saying, when potatoes and other vegetables are well cooked, they become soft and tender. And you possess such a tender nature. You are so compassionate. Now, in English translation, the real fun of this repartee, of this play of words, you will miss. He's actually playing with the words. In Bengali, Siddha, as in Sanskrit, means one who has attained something. Is Siddha. In spiritual life, he has attained certain stage or certain evolution. He has evolved to a certain stage. That he's a Siddha Purusha. And Siddha also means anything which is boiled. So now you will find that otherwise, that's why in English translation we lose the fun. After saying that you are Siddha, when Vidyasagar asks that how is it that I am Siddha, that I am the perfected one? Though I am a learned soul, but as far as the spiritual illumination is concerned, in which the Siddha word is used, why are you using it for me? And Ramakrishna now is playing with the words. When potatoes and other vegetables are well cooked, they become soft and tender. Means, yes, maybe that spiritual realization hasn't happened, but the experiences of life have cooked you nicely. You have went through so much of exercise, as they were telling, that whom he used to help, they will always try to harm him in return, or don't accept that they have been helped. They will be indifferent to him, and he had to go through so many challenges of life, betrayals. But that made him more and more soft. So here you will find that though you have not gone through spiritual practices, but you have taken the facts of life in such a way, you have reacted to them in such a way that speaks of your evolution. It's a wonderful thing. That we think for spirituality, I have to meditate, I have to read scriptures, and all those things. But religious, one can evolve spiritually even in a very unconventional way. There's no need to read scriptures. If I can react to the situation in a proper way, that instead of it hardening me, it can soften me. It can make me more humble. Though outwardly I may not conform to any practice, but it can really change my personality. So just see the words that Sri Ramakrishna is here in this world to teach us spirituality even through secularism. He's not speaking of God, nothing. What he's saying, when potatoes and other vegetables are well cooked, they become soft and tender. And you possess such a tender nature. You are so compassionate. There's all laughter. Now you find Vidyasagar immediately understands in what sense Ramakrishna is saying. And then what he will reply is something interesting. But when the paste of kalai pulse is boiled, it becomes all the harder. Kalai is a type of lentil in Bengal. It's a lentil. So if it is boiled, it becomes harder. So that's why he's saying that you're saying that by boiling I become soft, but there are some pulses which by boiling just the opposite becomes harder. Master now will say, but see, wonderful, but you don't belong to that class. Mere pandits are like diseased fruit that becomes hard and will not ripen at all. So we know that in plant there are some diseased fruit that we are waiting, that it will be getting ripened, and then we find it has dried off because it has been already infected by the germs. So it doesn't get the chance to. So pandits are like that. What he's saying is something very interesting. In this life, most of the time we will find that we have no control over the situations of life, the circumstances of life. When we start our life, when we are young, when we are with our degrees, qualifications, money, I think I am the Lord of the world. Whatever I desire, I get. It takes few years to understand life has its own ways. With all this, I can have no control over it. If you want to really relate to these words very deeply, today after the class, you just search in the internet the last words of Steve Jobs. You will understand what it means that with all money, you can do nothing. You can do nothing. Very nicely, I'm not relating here. You just search it. You all have this, the computer, internet. That the last words of Steve Jobs. How that those words are revealing. The last words of Steve Jobs. So we all will find, in this life, we will find that with all our wealth, with all our position, we come to a situation. Steve Jobs had cancer. With all the money, could he cure himself? That's the context in which he's saying something. And then he will give so many examples. With money, what can you do? So we will find in our life, the situations are there over which we have no control. Now, our evolution consists of what? How we react to that situation. So our reaction decides what we are. That the story which we were relating a few class in some other class, the story of a recluse to whom a person went for some consolation. He has been betrayed by life. All those to whom he thought his near and dear ones betrayed him. So being betrayed, being totally betrayed by life, he was suffering intensely. So he went to that recluse, to that hermit, and was relating his life's agonies, that I have been betrayed by all. Life has no meaning for me. And that the recluse, the hermit, took him to the backyard of his hermitage. And the backyard, the fencing of his backyard was done with the maple trees. The maple trees were there on which the barbed wire was nailed. So that was the boundary. So he took him near a tree which was extremely curved. He told, see, when I purchased this property, the previous owner, he planted these maple trees on the boundary. They were all young, tender plants, and he just made it a point to make them the stump instead of having extra stump. So he made those young maple trees as if the stump and nailed the barbed wires on that. Now these trees have grown. These nailed barbed wires are something which are going to stay with them. It is like unchangeable circumstances of life. Now you see this plant, this tree is so curved. throughout this period of growth, it was revolting. That why something should be nailed on me by this barbed wire. He was not accepting. And that made his growth so crooked. Now come with me. He took him to another maple tree. That maple tree has grown straight, and the barbed wire has gone through the core of the tree. The trunk of the tree, in the core of the tree, the barbed wire has passed, it has grown straight. Now this recluse told, see, this tree, it somehow understood that it is going to be with me. I have to stay with it. I have to stay with it. It accepted it. And now you see, nothing could hamper its growth. It's straight. So in this life, how we react to the situation, on that depends our growth. So just see, there's no question of God. He has went to Vidyasagar, that who in a conformed way is not a spiritual person, though he's a spiritual, like that Falgu river. It's underflow. To him, the words which are saying is wonderful. That you are Siddha, why you are so soft, all the struggles of life have made you soft. Vidyasagar told, why? It could have made me hard. That's why there are some things which are, when boiled, becomes hard. And Ramakrishna is saying, no, you're of not that class. You are not a mere Pandit. It's not that academic knowledge is not something just for your intellectual growth. You have internalized what you have studied. That has become the part and parcel of your life. And that has enabled you to react to the situation in a different way. And that speaks of your softness. So just see these words, it's playing with words, but these are all having so deep meaning. Now Ramakrishna will speak of the ordinary so-called academic knowledge, which has nothing to do with our inner life, which only speaks of our degrees, of our qualifications, of our certificates. Still remember, in our training center, very interesting, we used to have examinations. So on Swamiji's Karma Yoga, we had some after the completion of the study of the Karma Yoga, there will be an examination. And some brahmachari got the highest mark. But it was found that when we will have to work together, somehow he had the tendency to quarrel with others, and most probably he won't be cooperating with others, trying to avoid the work, cannot take the work in the proper sense as a dedication to the divine. So then the acharyas used to say, just jokingly, he has got highest marks in Karma Yoga. So that's our education sometimes, that what we study has nothing to do with our life. You are studying Karma Yoga, getting highest marks in Karma Yoga, but nothing is being reflected in your karma. So that's like the vultures. That vultures soar very high, in the words of Ramakrishna, in the sky, but their eyes are fixed on rotten carrion on the ground. The book learned are reputed to be wise, but they're attached to woman and gold. Like the vultures, they are in search of carrion. They are attached to the world of ignorance. Compassion, love of God, and renunciation are the glories of true knowledge. So unless the compassion, the love of God, renunciation, these things are manifested through your life, those things have been internalized. What's that there in the mere education? It doesn't help us. Throughout our life, what happens? That as we don't have that proper orientation, we get sufficient kicks from life, but we still follow the old ways. As Sri Ramakrishna in some other places giving the example that a camel thrives on thorny bushes. It eats thorny bushes, it bleeds, but again it eats thorny bushes. We don't learn from the experiences of life. We go on with our old ways. So there's to learn from the experiences of life and become wise. For that, all the spiritual values has to be internalized. That's why Swami Vivekananda, after seeing Ramakrishna's life, when he say that he has never mentioned the word Sri Ramakrishna, he has never referred Ramakrishna in his lectures. But if you read between the words, you will find Swami Vivekananda have never referred the name of Ramakrishna in his lectures. That's true. Almost he has, in most of the places, he has not referred. Very few references we find. But what he was speaking was actually the commentary of the life of Ramakrishna, nothing else. Why he has not referred to the name? Because he himself told throughout the religious history, the incarnation comes to preach some ideas, and his disciples forget the ideas and start worshipping the person. The person becomes more important. His ideas for which actually he came down, those become trivial. Just believe in him. What he says, he have nothing to do with that. The crucifixion of Jesus becomes the passion of the entire Christianity. What he spoke in the Sermon of the Mount is become secondary. Those things are to be internalized. We never think of that. Just believe in this person. That's their over. I'm just giving one example. It happens with all our religious tradition. So to avoid that, we find he has not mentioned the name, but it is his ideas. Just to give an example, in many places, Swami Vivekananda in his lecture is saying education is the nervous association of ideas. What is it is actually speaking? That the idea should become a nervous association. It should become a stimuli response conditioning. Where he learned it? Seeing Ramakrishna. One day he heard from Ramakrishna that he cannot touch any metal, because when he was doing sadhana, he had the idea that the coins are made of metal, all the currencies are made of metal. So as I have renounced wealth, I won't touch any metal. Even he used to take food on some banana leaves, plantain leaves. There's water used to be, the tumbler used to be some earthen made of that clay. So he couldn't take in metal. So Swami Vivekananda thought that it is an exaggeration. How can that? He says that if he touches any metal, he has a tremendous pain. His hand just gets curved. What you say, that as if he has been stung by a scorpion. So he thought this is exaggeration. It cannot be true. Most probably, whenever he sees metal, it has his mind somehow, because of its long associations, repels from it. So one day, to test Ramakrishna, what he did, when Ramakrishna was not in his room, he kept a coin below the mattress. It's not a very thick mattress. In India, if you go, it's a tropical country where in summer we use very thin mattress, so that it's even when you are lying on it, it is quite cold. If it's a thick mattress, the mattress itself gets so hot, it almost becomes impossible to lie on it. So they use and the materials they use is also something different. It is something dried grass they use. With that, they make that carpet. So it's very thin. So beneath that, he kept that coin. And he was hiding himself to watch that when Ramakrishna comes and sits on the bed over the mattress, whether that he says that even unknowingly the metal touches him, he feels the pain, whether it really happens. And when Ramakrishna returned to the room, sat, suddenly he jumped up and called his nephew Ramlal. Ramlal, please come, please remove the mattress, please see if something is there or not. And he found the coin. And then he realized that most probably to test him, someone has kept the coin. And then he finds Narendra. He was happy that, yes, you should always test one whom you accept as your teacher. See him day, see him at night, see him 24 hours. Then only you believe in him. He was happy. And Naren was amazed. Can it really happen? That his total reflex has changed. Total. Just as in the Bhagavad Gita, as it has been mentioned, that for a realized soul, the things which attracts us, for a realized soul, all those allurements makes a realized man just crawl within like a tortoise. That's just the way the tortoise withdraws its limb within the shell when it finds something there is a danger. A realized soul is so sensitive. It will, instead of spreading out, just the reflex has become opposite. It will withdraw itself. And that's what we find in the life of Ramakrishna. That makes Vivekananda say, education is a nervous association of ideas. That's why Swami Vivekananda, when Ramakrishna came to Vidyasagar, seeing all those compassion, everything manifesting through his life. So that's why he's saying that you have actually become so soft. Your experiences of life have boiled you to softness. Otherwise, ordinary persons are like vultures. They soar very high in the sky, but their eyes are fixed on rotten carrion on the ground. The book learned are reputed to be wise, but they are attached to woman and gold. Like the vultures, they're in search of carrion. They're attached to world of ignorance. Compassion, love of God, and renunciation are the glories of true knowledge. So this is the person who was asking just before meeting Vidyasagar, have I to button my shirt? So this is the person has totally changed. So this wonderful character of Ramakrishna, Deva Manava, is such a intertwined. Now he's a human like any of us. Suddenly he becomes larger than life figure. That's a wonderful thing which charms us, which really attracts us to Ramakrishna. That he never he's never posing to be a spiritual person. He always is a humble person. But the moment the divine has made it a point to work through him, such a wonderful instrument he is. And he's bound to be, because there is no trace of ego in him. And the divine finds the best instrument, like that flute in the hand of Krishna. It's just the music which comes out. And so in such a spontaneous way, who will say an illiterate, almost an illiterate person, not illiterate, Ramakrishna knew to read and write, but his education was not to the the school or college level. He knew to read and write, but in later life, even that writing became as he was not practicing regularly, that writing became very hazy. In the beginning, in his olden days, now we have found his writings are there. His own handwriting things have been preserved. He had a very wonderful handwriting as a child. Very wonderful. It's like calligraphy. But in later years, of course, when he's writing Noren Shikhe Dibe, that's quite hazy, because he was not practicing anymore that writing anything. The thing is, for all practical purpose, he was an uneducated. As far our academic knowledge is concerned, he was uneducated. He, for the first time, is meeting the most learned man of West Bengal in those days, and just see the way he's conversing with him. It's the divine who is working through him. That's what Ramakrishna used to say, that Ma Rash Thele them. That, when you husk the paddy, the one who is husking, he is busy with the husking. Someone else has to just go on pour in the cereals. So Ramakrishna says that when my speaking is like husking, that I have to speak something I am speaking, but someone else is just pouring the cereals. Ma Rash Thele dichen. And that's what we find through his words. That down-to-earth person is totally become a larger than life figure, and even inspiring personalities like Vidyasagar. So we'll continue. It's a very, very interesting conversation that we will continue again in the next class. With this, we conclude our discussion today. Thank you all. Namaskar.